but when you get the slides later, you can check out the source. There was some research where it was found that the median size of a web page is 2 megabytes now. So this sounds quite huge for me, especially if we consider being like with a slower internet connection on our mobile phones. And it contains 170 resources. So we've got lots of requests going from your device to the server and back, which also makes this website quite slow. And very few sites, and this is actually something which the research revealed, are using optimization techniques. So especially image compression is rarely used. So this is also a reason why the websites become so huge. So why is this a problem? It might be that the user doesn't have a fast internet connection, and with a slow internet connection, 2 megabytes could be quite huge. And many users will access your sites with mobile devices now. And with mobile devices, we don't only have the issue that we've got like the slow internet connection, but we only got, at least in many countries around the world, we've got these quotas on our mobile contracts. So for me, as I'm in the Netherlands now, I've got my German contract, and actually my mobile provider offers me like 50 megs of traffic for a day. So if one website has like a traffic load of 2 megabytes, how many websites can I actually use with my 50 meg contract? So this is actually something we need to consider when we build those websites, and we actually need to focus on those parts of our websites which create the biggest load for the user. But what are those parts of my website which creates this load? So the first part is actually the images. I just mentioned it, we should use some kind of image compression. But there are other parts of our websites which become increasingly big and create a burden for the user. So we actually should start fixing our websites for our end users so that we don't get like responses like this. I found this on Twitter, so it was pretty popular some time ago. And this is actually the experience our mobile users get. And the website is not only huge and slow, but it's also cluttered with all those advertisements around it. And if you like optimize your website for desktop users where they've got a huge bandwidth and like lots of space on their displays. But once people enter your website from a mobile device with a slow connection, this becomes a really huge pain for the user and will drive users away from your pages. So let's look at the numbers and go into some detail about how this actually looks like when you analyze public websites out there. I got those numbers from httparchive.com, which is a pretty nice source to get an overview about the overall web economy and look at pages and get different statistics. So one screenshot I brought here is the total transfer size for all those popular websites out there. And what we actually can see is that the average transfer size is increasing and increasing. And I think a few years ago we thought we reached a level where this all became static and the websites don't become bigger. The only huge traffic is caused by videos, but the rest is quite static. But it's still increasing, and with the user being on mobile devices and slow internet connections, this is a big issue for us. And especially these, the lower numbers is something we need to consider, the HTML requests. So we get all those traffic going from the device to the server and back, which is extremely painful for mobile users with a slow internet connection. So another point we found when we analyzed these numbers is that JavaScript libraries became a huge burden for users using modern web applications. So if we look at the numbers from the HTTP archive, we see that many websites have an increasing number of script tags in there and use like not only external but also internal libraries. And the number of libraries keep increasing. So when you look at the HTTP requests, the number of HTTP requests is also quite huge and more than I personally expected them to be. So like we've got like 50 to 75 HTTP requests on 20% of the websites, which is a pretty impressive number from my point of view. And this is actually caused by all those JavaScript libraries. So when we look at the average load of those websites out there, the biggest part is actually images, and this is something we expected, but the second biggest part is actually JavaScript by now. And we do all those nice things with minification of JavaScript, and we've got these build tasks which put all the JavaScript together to minimize the HTTP requests to our server. But this is actually something that we might do, but lots of people out there don't do this until now. And we actually need to consider this when we talk to other developers and when we develop our own projects. And we might even need to go back to our old projects and start fixing those old websites and talk to our customers about starting new projects on websites which have been finished some time ago. So this is actually something we discovered when we did all this analysis. And when we look at a real-world example, I did a scan of one of the biggest web properties by Microsoft. It's a popular site you might all know if you've used Internet Explorer in the past. It's MSN. It's a nice news portal. No one dares to use because it has all those nice news about all the people no one knows about on there. So when I scanned this website, I actually found out that we've got the exact distribution of traffic and load on the website, on the MSN website I just mentioned. The biggest load is actually here the image. It's the images, and the second biggest load is the JavaScript. And the distance between the JavaScript on the website and the images isn't as big as we all might have expected. So this is something we need to look at and we need to consider when we build our website and start adding new JavaScript libraries every few months. And every few months there's a new JavaScript library which is interesting and new, and we might add it to our website. We always need to consider that this adds additional load to our website and additional traffic and HTTP requests. So this is something which was quite surprising for me when I analyzed this data. So what can you actually do? You could scan your website, and a pretty good source for that is webpagetest.org, and this is the website where I got these screenshots from. So you can visit the website and scan your site, and you get a really nice external view onto your website. So what you get is this nice timeline view we've got here on the left, and you can split it down to milliseconds. And this is pretty good if you want to get into the shoes of a user in another country who might open your website and just wait how long it takes to actually completely load your website and load all the assets you got on your website. And this is really shocking if you scan your website and you notice that with a slower internet connection, people wait 30 seconds for your website to show up. So no one waits 30 seconds for a website to show up if there's a competitor out there who you might go to. And you also got these nice statistical data about your website. So this is actually something I recommend you to do, scan your website on this page. So this was actually the first big thing we found. But let's go to the second part, which actually is the part where we as Microsoft come into play. So the second part is that the web looks differently. So we all expect the web to look same for every user. But when we look at the web from a different point of view, means from a different device or a different browser, the same website looks completely different. So we found this when we started our work for the new browser in Windows 10, and we checked out different websites on different browsers, and this is a real-world example here where we found that on mobile Safari, mobile Firefox, and the mobile Internet Explorer, those websites look completely different. But this has different reasons, and there are different approaches to fix this. So the first approach would be fix this from the browser maker side. So the browser maker can start fixing our mistakes that we made as a developer, because it's not the fault of the browser that those websites look differently on different browsers. It's our fault, because we got these browser switches in there, and we like detect browsers and offer different versions of our websites to different users on different devices. So the browser maker could start fixing and working around our issues. The second point is we should stop repeating our mistakes from the past, and this is actually these are actually mistakes which I did and most of you might have done because of Microsoft. So this is the screenshot I brought here, compatibility view in Internet Explorer. Everyone was building like workarounds for Internet Explorer for older versions to make the websites to work. And some websites, like in this example, might refresh in compatibility view and go down to a different render mode in Internet Explorer, and the user would get the old Internet Explorer 8 experience, even though the user is actually using Internet Explorer 10. So this is actually something that we did to help the user initially, but in the end it turned out to be a big mistake because the user wouldn't get the best experience on his device. So what can the browser makers do? Let's get into the perspective of browser maker like Microsoft, and we thought about how we as browser makers can help the user to get the best experience. And one of the things we did is like add the support for prefixed CSS tags. So we noticed that many of the issues, especially in the mobile space, were created by developers who were optimizing for WebKit, because the first major smartphone out there with a mobile browser was the iPhone. And the iPhone is using mobile Safari, and this is why in the mobile space many developers used the WebKit prefixes in their CSS. So what Microsoft actually did is add the support for the WebKit prefix to the new browser, Microsoft Edge, which is delivered with Windows 10. And what a surprise, after that, the websites magically worked. So the developer didn't have to change anything. The browser maker worked around the issue the developer created. So this is something that the browser maker can do, but something that we need to take back home and think about and start maybe fixing those mistakes that we might have done in the past, as maybe some of those features, for example, the gradient was just something which was implemented in Safari and not in other browsers. So now we can start like fixing this and adding the standardized version as well, in addition to the WebKit prefixed version, even though it might work in Microsoft Edge now, but probably it doesn't really work in other browsers like the mobile Chrome, if we just use the WebKit prefix. We also see the same thing on the desktop, so it's not only a mobile problem. When you open some websites in Internet Explorer, and even if you've got the most up-to-date Internet Explorer, like Internet Explorer 11, you might get this experience. You go to a website, click on a menu, and the menu doesn't open. So how did Microsoft fix this? In Microsoft Edge, they added the support for WebKit transitions, and magically it worked. So this is exactly the same as we did in the mobile space, but this is something a browser maker shouldn't be doing in the future, because we as developers can use the standardized version of those CSS tags and those features which every browser supports by now. So talking about those CSS prefixes, and this is where our numbers come into play, where we scanned like the top 20,000 websites in Germany for using CSS prefixes. So what do you think? How many of the websites actually use CSS prefixes without delivering the non-prefixed version? So rough estimate. Well, no idea. We didn't have an idea either, so we did the scan. And what we found out is that about 8 to 9% of the top 20,000 websites still use all those prefixed CSS tags without the non-prefixed version. And those are like almost 10% of the websites which potentially have issues if users enter them or access them with a wrong browser. So they're not using the wrong browser, but they are using a browser which the developer didn't intend the user to use. So those 10%, so like 10 or to 15 of you should have a look into their website, whether you are still doing that, and add the non-prefixed version to give all the users the best experience. So if we look at other issues we see when we look at the same page on different devices, we found that many users on our smartphones, on Windows Phone 8.1, didn't get the best experience on websites. So we started playing around, and we changed the user agent string. So with an update to Windows Phone 8.1, the Windows Phone Internet Explorer doesn't identify with the standard Internet Explorer user agent string anymore, and suddenly websites started to work, because the Internet Explorer on the Windows Phone 8.1 started identifying as like Safari or Chrome or whatever to give the user the best experience. And this is where we found that many websites still use user agent detection to drive the user to a specific version of their web experience. With Microsoft Edge, we then added some additional features so that the website looks the same as the website is supposed to look, and the same as the websites will look like on a mobile Safari. So these are actually still fixes the browser maker can do. But how many websites still use user agent detection to make some kind of decision? So the numbers we found when we analyzed those websites in Germany were that still 60% of the websites out there use user agent detection in their JavaScript code, which might not be a bad thing. You could just track the user agent to do some statistics, or your library needs that to do some logging or something else. But there are still lots of websites who use this as a browser switch to deliver different experiences to different browsers. You might use that in an enterprise context, especially where you've got like old versions of Internet Explorer and people can't switch to a modern browser, but you shouldn't be using that in like a consumer scenario anymore, because every user has the option to move to a modern browser, may that be an up-to-date version of Internet Explorer or Firefox, Safari or Chrome. So this is actually something many of us need to look into to give all our users the best experience. So what we as Microsoft did is, when we developed Microsoft Edge, is we also changed the user agent string of Microsoft Edge to a user agent that looked pretty similar to Google Chrome. So when you do user agent detection with like a standard library on your website, there's a high probability that Microsoft Edge, the new browser in Windows 10, will be identified as Google Chrome, so that your website delivers the best experience to users with Microsoft Edge. This is some kind of a workaround Microsoft took to make the web compatible for the user, but this isn't a workaround a browser maker should have to make in the future. So please look into your code and have a look at the user agent detection you do, and think about whether you need this to have like some browser switches or do some kind of logging. But can you actually detect a browser correctly? Because when you look at the different user agent strings, every browser pretends to be someone else. So Chrome pretends to be Mozilla, Edge pretends to be Chrome. So it's all a big mess, and it's actually really hard to make a correct detection of the user agent. And when you now add all those mobile browsers, can you actually do this? Yes, there are standard libraries to detect a mobile browser. It's pretty easy. I looked on the internet, I found a nice library. So this is how it looks like. And what could go wrong? It's all clear. We can all maintain that. And if there's a new browser out there and a new update to Google Chrome or Microsoft Edge or whatever, we can simply update that library. Yeah. But can we really? Do we always know when there's a new browser out there? So doing user detection is really hard. It has been important in the past with all the old versions of Internet Explorer like IE6, IE7 out there, but right now we don't actually need that anymore in most cases. There are some cases, especially in the enterprise context or with other countries like China, where people still use really old versions of the Internet Explorer. This might be something you still need in your website, but for most websites it's actually something we should try to avoid because it's a major cause of problems for our users. So do you actually deliver the same markup? And this is another test we ran. So we took different user agent strings and compared the result coming back from the web service. And what we found is that we are on a good way there. So about like 15% of the websites still deliver different markup to different browsers depending on the user agent string. So those 15% of the websites should really have a look at their JavaScript and their server-side code and decide why they are still doing that. And what we actually did there is access the website with modern user agent strings. So we didn't just open the website with the IE6 user agent string and were surprised that it's a different markup than we get with like the user agent string of Google Chrome. So we took up-to-date browsers and compared the result. So this is something which is really a little shocking for me, that we still heavily depend on this user agent detection for our websites. So what tools can we actually use to improve on all that? So I mentioned a few issues, and the biggest issue is apparently the user agent detection, but how can we act on that? So the best thing to do is actually move away from browser detection to feature detection. Sounds easy. It's not that easy in reality, but we've got some nice tools to work around that. So the first tool I want to mention, many of you already might know about this tool, is the website caniuse.com. On caniuse.com, you simply enter the feature you want to use, maybe some CSS feature or JavaScript feature you want to use in your web application, and you instantly get a result with a display of the different browsers which support that feature according to your market. And this is pretty interesting because once you switch this to like Germany, Netherlands, France, or whatever, you get the browser distribution for your market and can decide whether implementing a certain feature or using a certain feature in your web application might lock out a huge percentage of users in a certain market. So this is a really good source you can use. There are also sources provided by the browser makers. We at Microsoft maintain this at dev.modern.ai and platform status, so there you can check whether a feature is already implemented in Microsoft Edge or the older versions of Internet Explorer, and you can also compare that with other browsers like Chrome, Safari, Opera, etc. Other browser makers do the same, so I got a screenshot here from a similar page developed by Google. It's the Chrome platform status, and you can do apparently the same as on the Microsoft page. You can check for a specific feature and compare that with other browsers. You get the information here, whether it's supported in the different browsers, and how many developers are already using this feature and how widely this is actually accepted in the market. So when you start using feature detection instead of doing the old style browser detection, so you detect a browser and deliver like some kind of old experience to older browsers, you should actually use feature detection, and with frameworks like Modernizer, this has become really easy. So just for me, how many of you are already using Modernizer? Yeah, about 50%, that's good. I really like Modernizer, especially after they refactored their website. So now you can just select the features you want to detect in your web application, and you get a customized package to decrease the size of the JavaScript library. So you don't have to download the whole Modernizer JavaScript library anymore, which is pretty cool and also tackles one of the issues I mentioned before. So check out modernizer.com. It's a nice JavaScript library to do feature detection like in this syntax. Another tool I wanted to mention is an open source project which was started by a French colleague of mine. It's called Vorlon.JS. It's a JavaScript library, and it's a debugging tool to remote debug your application on a huge set of devices. So you actually install a small Node.js server on a web server or on your local machine, and then you can embed a script tag which opens a script from this server and gives you remote debugging possibilities for your web application. So let's have a short look into that. I already installed Vorlon.js, so I got it here in the browser. Let me duplicate my screen. So this is how the Vorlon.js website looks like. You get the information how to install Vorlon.js. It's installable via the Node Package Manager. And once you've got this installed, you can start the server on your local machine. So let me do this from the Node command prompt here. Simply type Vorlon to start the server. And once the server is started, you can access the server from any browser on your machine. So I will open the dashboard now. It's on localhost 133.337. And once the dashboard is loaded, you can connect your web application to that dashboard from like a mobile device or 10 mobile devices, different browsers, and start debugging your website from this browser, which is actually interesting because on a desktop PC, you might have developer tools. Just hit F5, F12 in Chrome or in Firefox or in Internet Explorer, and you will get the developer tools. But how do you do this on a mobile device? You can't just simply pull out your Android phone with the mobile Chrome and open the developer tools to debug your JavaScript on this mobile device. But with Vorlon.js, you actually can. So I opened a little sample site here, which I will refresh now to connect it to the server. Also got the same site opened in, I'll open it in Chrome as well. And now we can see that we've got two clients connected here on the left side. So those two web applications running in those different browsers can actually connect to the dashboard. And if we had hosted the dashboard on a web server somewhere out on the internet, you all could connect from the application in your on the web server to this dashboard. And what we can do now is, like, for example, identify the clients. So we've got a WebSocket connection between the server and the clients. And once we've identified them, we can start debugging on those different client machines. We can open one of the client machine and get remote access to the DOM tree. We can do browse the DOM tree. We get the highlighting. We can see this on the top right here. And we can even open like an interactive JavaScript console. So this console is actually executed in the context of the browser which is running the client page. So if we open navigator.user agent, we should get back the user agent string for Microsoft Edge. Oh, it's gone. Strange. Okay, then let's skip this and have a look at the Modernizer tab, which we can use to now compare the different features in the browsers we're using. So when I open the other application, which is the one in Chrome now, I can also open the Modernizer tab and then scroll down to the different features and compare the different features on my mobile device, the different browsers, and so on. So this is a really nice tool you can use, and it's actually an open source project. You can extend yourself. So you can, let's flashing, maybe my resolution is too high. So you can actually expand this project with your own extensions, and you can start contributing to this project as well. So this is something you can actually use for free, and it's not a Microsoft project, but maintained by 2 Microsoft employees who started that. Okay, let's move on. So what do we got there? So there are a few things I would like to ask you to do. So please stop supporting old versions of browsers. Here, Internet Explorer. So we as Microsoft will start doing the same. We will stop supporting old versions of Internet Explorer. I will give you a glimpse of the Internet Explorer and Microsoft Edge browser roadmap in a few seconds. So please start building workarounds for Internet Explorer 8. Please clean up your old code, and especially the code you hated to write. And I know everyone wrote some code we were ashamed of, and we put it somewhere deep down into our library. And it still works, but we are still ashamed of it. And please don't repeat the same mistakes we did with IE6, because with IE6 we had a really dominant browser which was really important for every web developer, and now we've got other very dominant browsers out there like mobile Safari and Chrome on the desktop. Please don't optimize for those browsers. Build websites that run on every browser. So these are actually 3 asks I've got to you, so we can all work together on a more compatible web if we all stick to that. So we all strive for a more native web, and this is actually the third area I wanted to mention. And when I talk about us as a community, I also talk about other browser makers. So when you followed the press and the announcements from the other browser makers, you might have seen that Google stopped the support for browser plugins in Google Chrome, and they will they have completely removed the support for those old Netscape plugin architecture in Google Chrome. So you're not able to use plugins like Java or Silverlight in Google Chrome anymore. And Firefox recently announced that they will do the same, so they will also get rid of all those extensions in Firefox. And Microsoft is actually following and completely removed the support for all of those plugins from Internet Explorer as well, from the follow-up of Internet Explorer, Microsoft Edge as well. So Microsoft Edge won't be supporting ActiveX anymore, won't be supporting browser helper objects anymore, and won't be supporting plugins like Silverlight anymore. So please avoid using those plugins. What's still important is that all of those 3 browsers will have a native support for Flash, but I think in a few years' time this will also be gone. Some good on plugins is that almost everyone already got rid of those plugins. So this is what we found when we analyzed the top 20,000 websites. There are like 90% websites which are plugin free. Those include the websites which still use Flash as a fallback for browsers which don't support like HTML5 video or audio, but including the websites which use Flash, we are at 90%, which is pretty good, and only like a really small percentage of those websites actually use Java, ActiveX or Silverlight. Okay. How does Microsoft help you as a developer? We actually started developing our browser differently. With IE9, we started building a standardized browser, which was like a huge step for Microsoft. So everyone was really happy that Microsoft will finally go and build a browser which uses standardized features. But a few years after we released IE9 and used modern web standards, we found that developers are still a little unhappy with what we do with Internet Explorer. The main reason is that we stick to standards, and standards take a long time to become standards. And if you look at the W3C, you will notice that it takes a few years for a standard to finally be a complete standard for everyone to use. So this brought us to the position that it took several years for us to implement new web features in Internet Explorer. So as many developers want to start using new features as soon as possible, with Microsoft Edge we will be adopting a new model which is driven by interoperability. So we will not only implement modern web standards in Microsoft Edge, we will also implement like de facto or some kind of standards which have been driven by the community. So as soon as many people use a specific feature or other browser makers implement a specific feature, we will also implement that feature in Microsoft Edge as well, and you won't have to wait like 3 years for Microsoft to adopt a certain feature in the future. Okay, with that, it's becoming increasingly easy for us to maintain our websites. So right now we still got different code paths. So we got a user opening our website, and some of the users are on Internet Explorer, and we got all those nice code paths for the Internet Explorer users. We've got the IE8 code path and the IE10 or 11 code path, and we've got the second code path for all the other modern browsers which are not Internet Explorer. In the future, there will only be one code path, and this is actually something I'm really happy about, that Microsoft will push towards just making the life of US developers easier in the future, so that you can just focus on one code path and not like 2 code paths and different versions of Internet Explorer anymore. So we will have the new browser, Microsoft Edge, being the modern browser by Microsoft on Windows. So this is how the roadmap will look like. Starting in January next year, we will stop the support for IE8, 9, and 10. So users will have to adopt Internet Explorer 11. And going forward, we will maintain Internet Explorer 11. We will add bug fixes and security fixes, but we won't bring new capabilities to Internet Explorer anymore. All the future investments will go into Microsoft Edge, which is, like I said, our modern browser, which will help you to have just one code path for Chrome, Firefox, Safari, and Microsoft Edge. Why do we do this? Why do we stop the support for the older Internet Explorer versions? We want to stop this fragmentation, which makes it really hard for developers to concentrate like on one code path instead of like 3 for Internet Explorer alone. So this is the rough roadmap you should be aware of. So if you've got customers out there still using older versions of Internet Explorer, tell them that Microsoft is going to stop supporting those browsers and that they should update to Internet Explorer 11 or another modern browser, and if they can, update to Windows 10 to start using Microsoft Edge. So this will make it easy in the future for both Microsoft, because we don't have to maintain like 3 or 4 different browsers, but also for US developers, as all those older versions of Internet Explorer will start disappearing. So what's next? What are the next steps? Report problems to browser makers. Please start a dialogue, especially with us as Microsoft. I can't talk for the guys at Mozilla, or can't talk for the guys at Google, but please talk to us at Microsoft. There are different ways you can do that. The easiest way is using Twitter. There's the MS Edge Dev Twitter account. You can just contact if you found issues in Microsoft Edge or Internet Explorer, or if you need new features, just reach out to this Twitter handle, and they are frequently answering all those questions. The second thing I want you to do is start asking for basic features and not only the new and unfinished ones, because there are still lots of unstable features out there in the web space, and we need to get these to a stable point before adding like new eye candy on top and having the same problem again and again, that people on certain browsers will not get the best experience of our website. You can ask for new features in Microsoft Edge through our user voice channel. This is actually our feedback channel, our official feedback channel by Microsoft, where you can add your questions and you will get a reply from the development team on the status of this feature request. The last point is please check your website. There are a few web scanners out there where you can check your website for compatibility. One of the scanners you can use is our Microsoft scanner on dev.modern.ie, which makes you aware of all the issues I just talked about. You can You get some insights into your website about browser detection, about plugins you might be still using, about delivering different HTML to different browsers. So this is actually a nice tool you can use to get a quick overview about the issues you might have in your website. So that's it. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your questions. You will just start asking, and have a great conference.